Hudson Hart had one rule: keep your head down and don't start trouble. But tonight, at the corner of Westlake and Pine, that rule shattered in the blink of an eye. He was just trying to get home after a double shift at the auto body shop when he heard the shout. His 6-year-old son, Jace, tugged at his hand, eyes wide as a man grabbed a woman by the arm outside the late-night cafe. "Let go of me," the woman snapped, her voice steady but her body tense. "I said we're not done talking," the man barked, tightening his grip. Hudson's feet moved before his brain did. "Hey," he called out, stepping between them. "Let her go." The guy looked him over Hudson's oil-stained hoodie, worn boots, and calloused hands. He clearly didn't see a threat. "And who the hell are you?" the man spat. Hudson didn't flinch. "The guy who's gonna make you regret touching her again." The guy sneered but let go. "Whatever, man, not worth it." He backed off, disappearing into the night. The woman exhaled and tried to straighten her coat. "You okay?" Hudson asked, glancing at her wrist where a red mark had started forming. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, thanks to you." Up close, she didn't look like someone who'd usually be alone downtown this late. Her coat was tailored, her boots expensive. Her black hair was swept into a low bun, her lipstick flawless. She looked like she'd walked out of a Vogue ad and landed in the wrong part of town. "I'm Hudson. This is my son, Jace," he said, motioning to the little boy now half hiding behind him. She smiled gently at Jace. "Hi, Jace, I'm Penelope Thorne." Jace gave a shy wave. "You're pretty," Penelope laughed, her eyes lighting up. "You're pretty charming." Hudson cleared his throat. "You need a ride or something?" Penelope hesitated. "I was waiting for my driver, but he canceled last minute." Hudson looked around. The streets were emptying fast. "Look, I don't live far. You can wait at our place until you get a ride." Penelope looked at him, and something in her eyes softened. "Thanks, I'd like that." Their apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that doubled as a dining room. But it was clean, warm, and filled with Jace's drawings on the fridge. "Sorry, it's not much," Hudson said, setting a mug of tea in front of her. "It's perfect," Penelope said, taking in the space with a sincerity that surprised him. Cozy, Jace sat across from her, eating dry cereal out of a bowl. "You got chased by a bad guy," Penelope smiled. "Kind of, but your dad saved me." Jace puffed out his chest. "He's really strong. He fixes cars and makes pancakes." Hudson rolled his eyes. "All right, buddy." Time for bed. Once Jace was tucked in, Hudson walked Penelope to the door. "You sure you'll be all right getting home? My assistant's sending a car now. Should be here in 5. "Assistant?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. She paused. "Yeah, I run a company." "Fashion stuff," he nodded, clearly not pressing. She liked that. "Thanks again," she said softly. "Anytime." She stepped closer. "You didn't even hesitate. Most people would have walked away. I've got a kid. If someone was hurting him, I'd want someone to step in." Penelope looked at him for a long moment. "You're a good man, Hudson." The car pulled up. The sleek black Mercedes looked out of place on the street. "Well, good night," she said, stepping toward the car. "Good night, Penelope." She turned as she got inside. "You ever eat anything other than cereal and tea?" he chuckled. "Sometimes I splurge on frozen pizza," she grinned. "Next time I'll cook." Then she was gone. 2 days later, she showed up at the garage. Hudson was underneath a '97 Ford when he heard the heels click across the concrete. "Hudson Hart." He slid out, squinting up at her. "Penelope." She was holding 2 coffees and a paper bag. "Breakfast." "You still eating frozen pizza?" "Yeah, but only on special occasions," he said, taking the coffee. "What's this?" "Egg sandwiches. I figured it was the least I could do for the guy who saved me." He leaned against the car. "You didn't have to, I wanted to." They ate on the hood of the car, talking between bites. She asked about Jace, and he told her about the custody battle that left him raising his son alone. She asked about work, and he admitted he was barely making ends meet. "What about you?" he asked. "What do you do exactly?" She shrugged. "I own a fashion company, T Designs. Maybe you've heard of it." He blinked. "Wait, like the billboard outside of downtown, that's you?" She nodded casually. "Yeah," he stared. "So you're rich." She pulled off a piece of egg sandwich. "I guess." "But that doesn't matter." "It kinda does," he said honestly. "You eat breakfast on the hood of a car often," she laughed. "Only with people who treat me like a person and not a wallet." That made him smile. Penelope started visiting more, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with food. Once she brought Jace a new backpack just because. Hudson tried to tell her no, but she insisted. It wasn't just charity, it felt like something else, something real. One evening, she invited them to dinner. At first, Hudson refused. "We're not exactly steakhouse people," but she just said, "Then you'll try something new." The restaurant was 5 stars with a valet who gawked at Hudson's pickup truck. The host greeted Penelope by name. Hudson pulled at his collar. "You sure we belong here?" Penelope leaned in. "You saved me." "You belong anywhere." He couldn't stop looking at her that night, the way she smiled at Jace, the way she made Hudson feel like he wasn't just some guy with grease under his nails. After dessert, she turned to him. "You know, I've had people throw money at me, buy me diamonds, offer me yachts. But no one's ever looked at me the way you do." Hudson's voice was low. "How do I look at you? Like I'm just me?" She reached for his hand, and in that moment, surrounded by flickering candles and soft music, the billionaire and the struggling dad weren't so different. They were just 2 people falling for each other. Penelope didn't plan on inviting them to her townhouse. It just happened one moment. She was walking with Hudson and Jace down the street after ice cream. The next, she was unlocking the front door and telling them to come inside before the rain started. The foyer was all glass and marble, tall ceilings and soft lighting. Hudson paused just past the threshold, his eyes catching on the oversized painting above the staircase. Jace ran ahead, stopping at the edge of a plush rug, transfixed by the grand piano gleaming in the corner. "You live here?" Hudson asked, his voice low but edged with disbelief. Penelope slipped off her coat. "It's quieter than I expected when I bought it. I thought the space would feel like too much, but it doesn't." Hudson didn't say anything. His silence said plenty. Jace pressed a key on the piano, the note echoing. "Can I play it?" Penelope nodded. "Of course." "Want me to show you something?" He nodded eagerly, and she sat beside him, her fingers gliding effortlessly through a short, bright melody. Jace watched her hands like they were magic. Hudson leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, his gaze unreadable. "Didn't know you played," he said once she stood again. "You never asked," she replied, walking past him into the kitchen. He followed her. "You always bring strangers into your home. You're not a stranger." "Pretty sure we are." She opened a cabinet and pulled down a small tin. "Tea, only if you're making it." She turned on the kettle. "You think I don't know how? I think you've probably got someone who does it for you." She looked over her shoulder. "You're not wrong. But I still remember how." They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of the water heating filling the room. Hudson's shoulders looked tighter than usual, like he didn't know where to put himself. "You don't have to pretend you're comfortable here," she said, sliding the tin back into place. He exhaled. "I'm not judging you, I'm just trying to figure out where a guy like me fits into any of this." Penelope poured the tea. "Maybe you don't have to fit into it. Maybe this part of my life doesn't matter when I'm with you. That's easy to say when you're the one who owns all of it." She handed him a mug. "Maybe. Or maybe it's harder." Later that night, after Jace had fallen asleep on her sofa and Hudson had gently carried him to the guest room, Penelope stood barefoot near the window, cradling her tea while the rain tapped against the glass. "You're quiet," she said without looking at him. Hudson leaned against the far wall. "It's a lot." She turned to face him. "You regret coming?" "No, I don't know what this is starting to look like. Maybe it's not about what it looks like." Hudson stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You're offering us things you don't even realize. A warm house, a piano, a safe place to sleep. I can't give you back any of that." "I didn't ask you to." "That's the problem," he said quietly. "I'm not used to someone giving without expecting anything." Penelope set her mug down on the windowsill. "You gave me something no one else has in years. You made me feel safe." Hudson hesitated. "You don't seem like someone who needs protection." "Doesn't mean I don't want it." The air between them shifted. He stepped closer, slow but deliberate. "You scare me," he said softly. She blinked. "Why?" "Because I'm starting to want more. And I don't know what that means when you've got a driver and an assistant and a closet that probably costs more than my rent." Penelope's voice was steady. "Then let me be scared with you." He looked at her, her face inches from his, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't look away. The next morning, Penelope insisted on driving them to the garage. Her driver was out, and she had a vintage coupe she rarely used but loved. Hudson hesitated when she tossed him the keys. "You want me to drive that? You trust me in your apartment," she said. "I trust you with my car." Jace sat in the back, kicking his feet against the leather. "This is the coolest car I've ever been in." Hudson pulled into the shop's gravel lot and killed the engine. "Thanks for the lift." Penelope leaned across the console. "You're picking me up tonight," he raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? There's a fundraiser I have to attend. Usually I go with someone I can't stand. Tonight I'd like to go with someone I trust. I don't own a tux. I'll take care of it." Hudson hesitated, then nodded. "All right." As he opened the door and stepped out, she called after him, "Oh, and Hudson," he turned, "don't be late." That evening, a courier arrived at the garage with 2 garment bags. One held a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. The other, a tiny suit for Jace, complete with a matching bow tie. Hudson stared at the bags, then looked at the card tucked between them. In neat handwriting, it read, "For the 2 men who remind me what real looks like." At the gala, the chandeliers sparkled like stars trapped in crystal. Penelope met them at the entrance, her hair swept up, her dress a midnight blue that shimmered like the ocean under moonlight. She looked at Hudson, fully dressed in the tuxedo she'd sent, and smiled. "I knew you'd clean up well," she whispered. He leaned closer. "I feel like a fraud. You're the only real thing in this room." As they entered, heads turned. Whispers followed them across the marble floor. Penelope ignored them. Hudson didn't. "Why are they staring?" he asked under his breath. "Because I never bring anyone to these," she said. "And tonight, I brought someone who matters." Jace was already seated at the kids' table, happily building towers out of breadsticks. Penelope guided Hudson to their table near the front. By the time the speeches began, Hudson had learned 3 things. The menu had words he couldn't pronounce, the wine was older than he was, and Penelope's world was built on appearances. But when she leaned over and brushed his knuckles with her fingers, none of that mattered. "What do you see when you look at me?" she asked quietly. Hudson didn't hesitate. "Someone who doesn't need the world but somehow still carries it." She looked down, her voice barely audible. "I'm tired of carrying it alone." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together beneath the linen-draped table. "You're not alone anymore." The first sign that everything was about to change came on a Tuesday morning, when Hudson walked into the garage and found Garrett, the owner, standing beside a man in a navy blazer with a clipboard and a forced smile. Hudson wiped his hands on a rag. "What's going on?" Garrett scratched the back of his head. "They're selling the place." Hudson stared. "What do you mean selling? The building's been bought. New owner, whole blocks getting redeveloped." He looked at the man with the clipboard. "When? End of the month," the man said. "You'll be compensated for early release from your lease." Garrett sighed. "I'm sorry, Hud. I didn't see this coming either." Hudson walked past them and into the back room. The scent of motor oil and rubber, the clatter of tools, it was the only thing he'd known for the past 6 years. He stood there, silent, the weight of it settling in his chest. Rent was already tight. Without this job, he didn't have a backup plan. That night, he didn't mention it to Jace. He boiled pasta, helped with a spelling worksheet, and tucked him into bed like nothing had changed. The knock on the door came just before 11. Penelope stood there in a long cardigan, her hair loose for the first time he'd seen. She didn't say anything right away, just looked at him with an expression he couldn't place. "I was at a board meeting," she said finally. "One of the developers presented a proposal for Westlake block acquisition. I recognized the name of your garage on the list." He stepped aside so she could enter. "They told us this morning." Penelope looked around the apartment, her brows drawn in. "Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't think it was your problem." She turned sharply. "Hudson, everything that touches you touches me now. You don't get to decide which parts of your life I care about." He leaned back against the counter. "You're used to fixing things with money." "This isn't about that." "Then what is it about?" "I don't want to be someone you save." Penelope's voice was quieter now. "You already saved me, don't you get that?" He didn't meet her eyes. She stepped closer. "Stop pushing me away every time things get hard." "I'm not going anywhere." He finally looked at her. "You don't owe me anything. I'm not doing this because I owe you. I'm doing it because I want to build something with you. But I can't do that if you keep shutting the door the second the world gets messy." He exhaled through his nose, jaw tight. You don't understand what it's like, waking up and calculating how much gas you can afford to get to work. You're right, I don't, she said, but I want to. I want to understand the parts of your life that scare you. I want to stand in the fire with you, not just visit when it's convenient. His voice was low. You don't know what you're signing up for. She reached for his hand. Then show me. The silence stretched between them until Hudson reached up and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. He didn't kiss her. He just stood there, his forehead against hers, breathing the same air. The next day, Hudson kept Jace home from school. Not because he was sick, but because they needed a day to be together. He didn't say it out loud, but Penelope somehow knew. She showed up mid-morning with a stack of Lego kits and a box of glazed donuts, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that said Team Dino. Hudson raised an eyebrow. Where'd you get the shirt? Your son made me a badge of honor. I figured I'd wear it with pride. Jace beamed. She's learning dinosaur facts. Penelope nodded solemnly. Do you know the Ankylosaurus had armored plates under its skin like natural chainmail? Hudson grinned and leaned against the doorway. You're full of surprises. They spent the afternoon building spaceships and dragons, and Hudson watched her the entire time. No makeup, no designer shoes, just a woman with cookie crumbs on her shirt and a plastic sword in her hand, laughing like she belonged in their world. It was the first time he thought, maybe she did. Later that night, after Jace had fallen asleep beside a half-finished tower, Penelope sat beside Hudson on the couch, her knees tucked under her. She looked around the room, then at him. I've been thinking about something. Yeah, my father used to tell me I'd never make it without the family name, that I'd get eaten alive in the industry. Hudson tilted his head. He wrong. He was right about the industry, but wrong about me. He waited. I've been running his company since I was 22. I've never taken a break, never stepped back, but lately I've been wondering if I'm building something that even matters. Hudson studied her. You want to walk away, she hesitated. I want to build something that doesn't require masks. He didn't speak. Penelope continued. I've been designing a new line, not under the Thorne brand, just me. Simple pieces, practical, affordable, made for people who live in the real world. He raised an eyebrow. You're saying you want to sell clothes to people like me. I'm saying I want to build something with you in mind. He looked away. That's a big shift, I know, she said, but I don't want to divide my life anymore. I'm tired of compartments. Hudson's voice was quiet. You sure you're ready for the fallout? I'm ready for the truth, she said. And you're the only part of my life that feels honest. He looked at her for a long time. Then, without warning, he stood and walked to the closet near the door. He pulled something from the top shelf and came back with a small, battered notebook. He handed it to her. Penelope opened it. Inside were pages of sketches, machines, parts, tools, but near the middle, the drawings shifted. A child's bed with built-in storage, a fold-out desk made from reclaimed wood, a modular couch with washable covers. These yours? She asked, running a finger over the pencil lines. I started sketching when Jace was a baby. Just ideas for how to make our space work better. Never showed anyone. She looked up. These could be real products, he shrugged. Just thoughts. No, she said, flipping the page. These are brilliant. He gave her a look. You're not just saying that because you like me. I'm saying that because I've seen 1,000 product pitches and none of them had this kind of soul. He sat beside her again. What would I even do with them? Build them, she said. I could help you find a way. Hudson didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring down at the floor. Penelope placed the notebook on the table and rested her hand on his back. You've been carrying the weight alone for so long. Let someone carry some of it. He didn't move. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand and held on like he might never let go. The first cabinet door slammed shut before Hudson realized how tightly he was gripping its handle. He took a breath, let go, and stepped back from the unfinished frame. The garage was gone, but the tools had followed him. Now they sat in a borrowed workshop behind an old community center, scattered across a workbench beside a half-assembled prototype of a convertible crib he'd designed from his sketches. The space was cramped, the air stale, but it was his. And it was quiet until the door creaked open and Penelope ducked inside, brushing sawdust from her sleeve. You missed lunch, she said, setting down a bag. I lost track of time, he muttered, wiping his hands on his jeans. I figured. So I brought you something with actual protein. She pulled out 2 wrapped sandwiches and a small thermos. Hudson reached for the food, but her hand closed around his wrist. You haven't been sleeping. I've been working. Working's different from running yourself into the ground. He sat down heavily on the nearest stool. There's a deadline. Penelope crouched in front of him. The city grant application isn't due until the end of next week. Hudson looked away. She didn't push. Instead, she unwrapped one of the sandwiches and handed it to him. Eat, then we'll talk. He took a bite, chewing slowly. Penelope leaned her back against the workbench, watching him. I don't want to mess this up, he said finally. This could be the only shot I ever get at something that's mine. It's not your only shot, she said. And it's not just yours anymore. His jaw tightened. That's the part I can't wrap my head around. What part? That you're still here. She didn't laugh or offer a clever retort. She waited. I keep expecting you to wake up and realize this was just some charity project you got too close to, he said. Or decide it's easier to go back to your world, Penelope straightened. I know exactly what world I want to live in, and it's not the one I was born into. Hudson's voice was low. You're saying that now. I've already made the calls, Hudson. I handed over day-to-day operations of the company last week. I'm stepping down. His head snapped toward her. You what? I'm launching the new line this fall, under a different name, smaller scale, my terms. He stood slowly, stunned. You really did it. I did, she said. Because I believe in what we're building, and because I believe in you. The air between them shifted. You know I can't match what you've given me, he said. Not even close. Good, she replied, because I don't want a transaction. I want a life. He stared at her, something raw flickering behind his eyes. I'm not finished, she added. I also talked to a friend from the city council. He raised an eyebrow. She's going to help us secure the space 2 blocks from here, the old bakery. We can convert it. Workshop in the back, storefront in front. Showcase your designs. Sell the finished pieces locally. Hudson shook his head, overwhelmed. Why would you put your name behind something like this? I'm not putting my name behind it, she said. I'm putting yours. He didn't know what to say. She stepped closer. You were never a project. You were a person I chose, a person I'm still choosing. Hudson's voice caught. I don't know how to be the man you need. She touched his chest. You already are. That night, they brought Jace to see the old bakery. The windows were boarded up, the paint peeling, but the moment they stepped inside, Hudson could see it. A clean corner for woodworking. A chalkboard wall for Jace to draw on. Space to breathe. Jace ran to the middle of the room. Can I have my own workbench? Hudson nodded. Once we fix it up, Penelope crouched beside the boy. You'll be the youngest co-founder in town. Jace beamed. Do I get a badge? You'll get a whole wall. Hudson looked at her, something warm settling in his chest. They spent the next week cleaning the place out. Penelope rolled up her sleeves and painted alongside them, hair tied back, laughing when she missed a spot and got it on her nose. Hudson didn't question it anymore. Every time he turned around, she was still there barefoot, paint splattered, and smiling like this was where she'd always belonged. By Friday, the bakery had transformed into something new. Hart and Thorne Design Co. The sign wasn't up yet, but the name was theirs. The night before the soft opening, Penelope stood beside Hudson in the back room, watching Jace fall asleep on a makeshift cot. The boy was curled beneath a fleece blanket, one hand still clutching a small wooden dinosaur Hudson had carved the week before. I want to marry you, she said quietly. Hudson turned to her slowly. What? I don't want to wait, she continued. Not because we need to rush or prove something. But because I know I've never been this sure of anything. He swallowed hard, voice rough. I don't have a ring. I don't need one, I just need you. He pulled her into his arms. Then yes. She looked up at him. Yes, I'll marry you. The wedding was nothing like the events Penelope had once attended. No ballroom. No guest list of 500. Just a rented garden behind a friend's cafe, string lights swaying overhead and chairs arranged in uneven rows. Jace stood between them, holding a small box with 2 engraved bands. Penelope wore a simple ivory dress, hair loose down her back. Hudson wore the only suit he owned, the same one she'd once sent him to a gala in. They said their vows with tears in their eyes and laughter in their throats. I don't have much, Hudson said, but I'll give you everything I've got. You already have, Penelope replied. You gave me a home. As the sun set, they danced barefoot on the grass, Jace twirling between them with sticky cake fingers and a wide grin. It wasn't the kind of life either of them had imagined. It was better. The grand opening of Hart and Thorne Design Co. arrived on a crisp September morning, the kind where the sun warmed your skin even as autumn whispered through the breeze. The newly painted sign above the doorway gleamed in soft gold lettering, and the scent of fresh varnish and cedar wood drifted out onto the sidewalk. Inside, the shop buzzed with quiet anticipation rows of handcrafted furniture, minimalist home pieces, and a cozy corner showcasing Hudson's sketches framed on the wall. Penelope stood by the front window arranging a display of folded linen throws, her fingers moving with practiced precision. She wore a linen blouse and worn-in jeans, her hair tucked behind one ear as she stepped back to assess the symmetry. Hudson adjusted a light fixture above the register, his expression focused as he tightened the last bolt. You adjusted that one twice already, she said without turning. It was crooked. It's not crooked now, he stepped off the ladder. Now it's perfect. She turned at the sound of his boots hitting the floor. You nervous? I've worked on cars and raised a kid, he said, but I've never sold a throw pillow. She closed the distance between them. Then it's your lucky day. The shop doors opened promptly at 10. The first few customers trickled in neighbors, friends from the community center, a couple of curious passers-by who'd seen the transformation of the old bakery and wanted to see what had replaced it. Jace helped hand out tiny paper bags filled with cookies Penelope had baked herself the night before, proudly explaining that he was the boss of the dinosaur shelf. By noon, they'd already made 7 sales. 2 tables, a bookshelf, and 4 sets of handmade coasters were gone, tagged and wrapped for delivery. But it wasn't just the purchases that mattered, it was the way people lingered, touching the furniture like it meant something, asking questions about the designs, listening intently when Hudson explained the function behind each piece. Penelope watched him from across the room. There was a stillness in him now she hadn't seen before, a quiet kind of pride that came not from being praised, but from being seen. You built this, she said when they finally took a break behind the counter. He looked around, eyes scanning the shop. We built it. She leaned in, her hand resting on his chest. You were always more than what life handed you. You just needed space to prove it. He kissed her then, not in the way people kiss in public for show, but like someone anchoring himself to something steady. She kissed him back, her fingers curling into his shirt, not caring who saw. Later that night, after the last customer left and the lights dimmed, they sat cross-legged on the floor near the front window, surrounded by empty coffee cups and half a bottle of champagne borrowed from the cafe next door. Jace lay curled in a blanket nearby, his head resting on Penelope's thigh, breathing deep and even in sleep. I got an email this afternoon, Hudson said, pulling his phone from his pocket. That grant, we got it. Penelope's brows lifted. You're serious? Enough to cover the next phase. Materials, expansion, maybe even a part-time hire. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that came from deep relief. And to think you didn't even want to wear the suit to that gala. I still think the tie was a mistake. Penelope gently brushed Jace's hair back from his forehead, her voice tender. I want to do something. Hudson leaned back on his hands. That usually means something terrifying. She looked up at him. No, something right, he waited. I want to legally adopt him. Hudson blinked. You do? I love him, Hudson. I'm not just in this for you. He's mine too. I want to be on his school forms. I want to be the one he calls when he scrapes his knee. I want to be his forever, just like I'm yours. For a moment, Hudson didn't speak. Then he reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together. He already calls you Mom when you're not in the room, he said softly. Her breath hitched. Then let's make it real. They filed the papers 2 weeks later. The day the judge signed off, Jace wore a tie and carried a drawing of their family 3 figures holding hands in front of the shop, a dinosaur sitting at their feet. Penelope cried when the judge said congratulations. Hudson kissed her in the hallway of the courthouse, then swung Jace into his arms and said, let's go home. Home was no longer a concept. It was a place. A family, a life they built plank by plank, moment by moment. That winter, Penelope's new clothing line launched quietly under the name P. Hart. The pieces were simple, functional, and made from sustainable materials. They sold out in under a week. She didn't hold any press conferences. She didn't attend any galas. Instead, she celebrated with a dinner in their kitchen, Jace climbing into her lap after dessert and whispering, "You're the best, Mom." Hudson didn't say much that night. He didn't need to. He just watched her watch them and knew he'd never been more certain of anything. In the spring, they planted a garden behind the workshop. Tomatoes, herbs, and a row of stubborn sunflowers that refused to bloom until midsummer. Jace named each one after a dinosaur and insisted on watering them every morning before school. On their first anniversary, Penelope surprised Hudson by converting the upstairs loft into a design space, just for him, complete with new tools, organized drawers, and a skylight. He surprised her by building a reading nook in the corner of the shop, filled with second-hand books and one of her favorite chairs. They didn't live in a mansion. There were no jets or yachts or designer wardrobes anymore, but they had slow mornings and loud breakfasts. They had paint-stained hands and evenings spent dancing barefoot in the kitchen. They had each other. And that was enough, always.